Welcome to Offbeat Frontiers, presented by KMFA Classical 89.5 Austin. Offbeat Frontiers brings you conversations with creators pushing the boundaries of the new music and indie classical art scene of Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Jess Griggs. Today we're at Quack Soundspace and Coffeehouse. We're joining musician and creator Daniel Fears and composer, arranger, and producer Nathaniel Earl. We'll discuss everything from their relationship as collaborators to their album being released this June. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Is there anything right now in the arts world that's exciting you? It doesn't have to be music. It can be visual art, film. Any folks that you're really into right now?
That's a great question. I love soulful music of all different genres. There's something that there's certain types of music that resonate here or here, you know. And in the classical space, artists like Prokofiev, his Fifth Symphony, I'm floored when I hear that. Mm-hmm. There's this artist in town called Black Odyssey, and it's really cool to see how he's just creating these really wonderful, both soundscapes and these incredible worlds. Everything he does is with some sort of style.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just it's pretty mind-blowing. Artists like this wonderful R&B soul songwriter person, Emily King, hits me. Of course, Stevie. There's all these different artists that for some reason are able to resonate with, I don't know, whatever frequencies we're emitting, you know? And that's who I'm drawn to.
Talking about all these different folks who are kind of creating, on how do I put this? In the movies, starting to create this tone poem, or Black Odyssey creating these soundscapes and worlds, kind of in and around so many different genres. I feel like looking at past interviews that y'all have done, there's a lot of folks who are they're in between genres, or they're post-genre. How do you relate to genre? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's funny, we were actually just talking about this earlier. I think the idea of blending genres is it's something that can feel really intentional or kind of gimmicky.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens in the kind of genre blending that we're doing, or what we're trying to do, is focusing on that intention, focusing on the common thread, the thing that locks the things together and kind of creates a new voice. It's the sum of the parts, as opposed to the individual parts splattered on a canvas. It's what those colors do as they overlap and overlay each other.
I think of genres too, and especially now, I think there's certain Gen Z musicians and artists and people who think of music in terms of it's these little touch points, these little reference points, an entry point. Subconsciously, that reminds me of such and such sound, or that reminds me of this song, or whatever. And it's all ways to get you into this, the message or whatever the intention the artist has. Mm-hmm. I was doing this motion because I was thinking it feels like a vortex, or maybe a little bit of hypnosis too. Honestly, it's using these different points to get an idea across, get a feeling across. I think genre can be used as a tool rather than a straitjacket. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You are in this box now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about that kind of intentionality with genre and genre mixing and bending, with this collaboration or even individually. What genres are you intentionally kind of mixing together and playing around with?
I mean, I come from sort of this composery background, so I work with a lot of orchestral music, or a lot of soundtracks, cinematic kind of stuff. So there's definitely some of that coming from my angle. But I'm also really into minimalism and ambient music. I like negative space as a color on a canvas, So there's a composer that I really like called Eric Whitaker, who's doing this right now, where he's a really renowned choral composer, but he's also really into modular synthesis. He just started doing this project that's combining modular synthesis with his choral compositions, and kind of the nuance between that is really fun and interesting. So I think, from my angle, I'm such a fan of Daniel's music and his melodies that when I'm listening to an idea that he has, or a song that he has that I'm collaborating on, I'm looking for those vacancies, that negative space, or like something that is a handoff point. So it's kind of like a dance of harmony as opposed to like me overlaying my stuff on his stuff. It's kind of a call and response sort of movement.
I feel like Nate's touch in composing too is really like opening up something that's already there. It's developing, building on the foundation that's already there, rather than, like you said, just like, this is my sound. Now it's gonna sound like this.
Building off of that, do you have personal philosophies about music? Like, do you have an ethos about your music creating as an individual?
I think to just start, when I first started writing and completing music probably 6 years ago or so, the idea was like, I just want to get the stuff that's in here out. I just want to express it. I just want to like be true to that. That stays the core philosophy, and I think that's what allows me to try different genres, to put my music, my sound into that. It's because this all feels like me. It's not. I'm not trying to put a front on or pretend to be something. This is just what I'm feeling, what I'm trying to express.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of similar to what Daniel was talking about. I think I've been writing music for a really long time, and about a year ago, maybe a couple years ago, it really shifted from being kind of writing music inward to writing music outward, if that makes sense. Like music is very communal. So when I'm writing something where before it might have felt kind of like a diary entry, or I would get to a point a year or two down the line where I was no longer feeling the things that I was feeling when I wrote that, and so it would be almost damaging to revisit it and relive it, and it became kind of like little trauma storage units that I had to like open up again every time I wanted to sing the song, or perform the song. So I kind of had to make this transition to observing the thing that I was writing about, embodying it in the spirit of communion, because then it became something that was shared, and I could come back to it later and not feel that same kind of like personal trauma response to it as much. It's more of a photograph and a storytelling. Storytelling's a really big thing too. I think that if I'm focusing on crafting a story based on my personal experiences and my personal circumstances, then it becomes no longer my thing. It becomes a universal thing, because a story is something that everyone shares equally. Whether the song or the music itself has words, there's still a story behind it.
Yeah. I listened to your episode of Toxicology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, great interview, by the way.
Thank you.
Great vibe. And that specifically was about your personal journey through addiction and to recovery. Right. I think you mentioned earlier on in the podcast how you needed stimulants to get on stage, or cocaine to get on stage.
Right, cocaine, alcohol.
Yeah. Have you seen, as you're going through that transition, as you're going through that recovery, like, has that informed who you are as a creator, who you are as a musician? Has there been a change in that creative output?
Yeah, definitely. I think the reason at the time that I needed substance to find comfort in my own skin, to do the thing that mattered most to me, was because there was like a very large spectrum of both positive and negative things in my experience, and those things had formed the creative process for me, but I didn't have the right tools, the right coping mechanisms to move through those things with any kind of grace. Like it was avoidance, it was escape, it was a lot of fear. And at the place that I'm at now, having had to sort of go into my center and then work to overcome these addictions, I've been able to embrace that full spectrum. Like I still feel all the way over here, and all the negative and all the positive, but I work at it from a place of center as opposed to being swung like a pendulum one way or the other, which is what happens with the substances. Like you get swung all the way up here and it feels great, and then you get swung all the way back down here. And being able to work from that place of center is really empowering, and each time that I'm able to do it without falling into a sense of fear or escapism, is reinforcing, and that stability and that security increases and becomes compounded.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I guess talking about kind of pivotal moments, Daniel, I know in a lot of your previous interviews you mentioned a lip injury while you were studying for a master's at Yale. And I find oftentimes these kind of pivotal moments or moments of transition get kind of squashed down into like a very consumable bit, right, to tell people. And can you kind of talk through like when you first noticed the injury and then like what that process of recovery and transition was for you as a musician?
Yeah, so for the listeners who don't know, I play trombone, and I'd been studying since I was probably 16 years old to become a professional musician. Went to the University of Texas and majored in music performance, and then went to Yale and was to get my master's in music performance, doing chamber music, orchestral things, solo things. I would say right before my second year, I experienced like a jolt of pain and an injury.
Yeah.
And after a little bit of rest, it went away, and then over time it began happening more and more frequently until it was just like all the time.
Yeah.
And that was a major turning point. I think Nate and I have talked about this. A sort of universal cue to sit down. Stop. Could you stop, please? That time was really pivotal for me because the thing that had been motivating me for so much of my life had been getting the approval of other people. It had been having people see me in the way that I wanted to be seen, or once I get the acceptance of so-and-so, then I'm like, I can have fun. I can like be a real person. I can like engage in the way that I want to. I'll have everything that I need once that happens. And I quickly found out how fleeting of a feeling that is, one.
Yeah.
How quickly it changes, regardless of how well you do. And three, my ability to stunt my own growth personally or allow myself to be hurting to get that. You know what I'm saying? I was just ignoring my body. I was ignoring my own needs. The need for community, the need for rest, the need for people in places that feel like home.
Yeah.
You know? So when I got that injury, I went from playing 5 hours a day to probably like 5 minutes a day, and had to totally relearn, working with a really great teacher out in Baltimore. And so it was just like taking things slow. I remember being so angry at everybody sometimes. Walking down the street like, F you, in my head, you know what I mean? Just like, leave me alone, you know? Just feeling so upset, you know? But in that time period, that's when I like started to reach out to other friends.
Yeah.
That's when I started writing music. That's when I started playing other instruments. Started recording and messing around with that. And the seeds of the trajectory that I have right now were planted right then in that moment, from the universal, like, hey, sit down, you know? Yeah. So it was super pivotal, and I would say it was painful, and then there was also some really joyous moments too.
Yeah.
You know? But it was so necessary. I'm so grateful for that time.
You brought up community, like ignoring that need for community, and I know music school can be that isolating experience. That kind of classical music training is just so like you're in the practice room, you are grinding, you're playing Ride of the Valkyries over and over again to a metronome. But going through that, and then coming to Austin, back to Austin, have you found that community here, you think? Have you built that community?
Yeah. And I think it's something that I have to keep coming back to and remembering, oh, that's right, reach out to so-and-so.
Yeah.
Reach out to your friends. Make time in your week before you plan other things. Oh, I need to see so-and-so. I need to call people at lunch or be around others at lunch, you know? Yeah. I'm grateful that people like Nate have become a part of that circle, a part of that community. I think we talk probably every week.
Multiple hours a week.
Yeah.
We have about like a 20-minute window at the beginning of the call where we just, goof off and talk about it, and then we've got about an hour and a half of work.
Nice.
But we set the tone with the goof off talk.
Yeah. It's the oil for the engine, you know what I mean?
100%.
Totally.
There's that saying, I think it probably gets abused now, but it's like faster alone, further together, you know? And I feel like that's so true. There's been little phases where I've tried to like do everything by myself, and that's just like the best way to burn out.
Yeah.
That's the best way to feel like you're not doing anything at all. And I find there's several artists in Austin that I've talked to who have that same feeling of isolation, of like hustling, putting yourself on social media, always being compared to someone else, and never really matching up. And when will you ever? Unless you're a Taylor Swift, and even she is still, something's chasing her. She's chasing something, you know what I mean? To continue to work as hard as she does. There will never be a point of like, oh, cool, I've made it. I've got universal acceptance, or like, you know what I mean? So just realizing that we need community. We need to connect to others in a real way beyond the screens. You know?
Totally. Yeah, and talking about connection, how did you all meet? How did you all start collaborating?
I went to a show Daniel played in, I think it was 2022?
22, yeah.
At Far Out Lounge. I saw an article that KUTX had written about him, and they mentioned Frank Ocean, they mentioned Eckhart Tolle, and I was like, all right, this sounds like my guy. So I went and watched him that night, and I fell in love with the music, and so my girlfriend at the time was there, and I was like, I want to go talk to him. She was like, go talk to him, and I was like, no, I'm too shy. And so I just I got a cocktail napkin and I wrote my phone number down, and I went up to him and I was like, hey man, if you ever want somebody to write strings for you, here you go, bye. You know. And then he called me a couple weeks later. I didn't think I'd hear from him. My thought was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if like there was a song that you were working on that I could put some strings on? And he called and he was like, so I got this idea, what if we like did all of my songs with just strings? And I was like, wow, way bigger apple than I thought I was biting into, but it sounds awesome. Let's go for it.
And I have to ask, because this interview series is kind of a snapshot of Central Texas music in Central Texas. What keeps you creating in Austin, in this area?
It's very much home, but also I see this community continually overcome adversity and reinvest in itself. You know, even this like City of Austin grant that's happened last year and is coming out again this year. I've spent time in other cities, but I've never spent time in cities that have the kind of programming like KMFA and like these grants and things like the Sims Foundation and HAM. I mean, there are so many opportunities for musicians here to feel like the community's reinvesting in them. I mean, it is expensive to live in. It's hard to make money as a musician, but there are other resources. You know, it's like the benefits package that you get when you get a corporate job. It's like, we'll pay you $2 an hour, but you get good benefits. Austin's got great benefits in the music world, and the community is rich and vibrant. And even though it's big, it still feels intimate. You know, like we were talking about before the interview, right before we started. I run into people that I've known for years that are doing these really cool, awesome new things. And then I meet new people like Daniel and yourself, and it just feels like an organism that is constantly growing and evolving and getting a little bit better.
It feels like the people that I meet are often on this sort of like trajectory. They're imagining community in a certain way. They're imagining art in a certain way. They're imagining closeness with other people, or like, what could this city look like? What could our careers look like? How do we make space for that in the future? And the more people I meet like that, the more convinced I am that this is a great home base for me. You know, people want to connect. People want to connect and create beautiful things. This is where I need to be right now.
So y'all have a collaboration and a project coming out in June of this year. Can we talk a little bit about that project and what it is and what people can expect?
So, like Nate was saying, the seeds for this project were planted 2 years ago. It started with a community-funded project that we filmed and recorded at KMFA last year. So we raised a Kickstarter for like $15,000. We got the money to pay the musicians to like get the lighting really nice, to get the videography, to get the whole thing. And from there, we're using those recordings from that live taping and releasing that into the world on June 6th. It's really beautiful. Nate, of course, is heavily featured on this record. We also collaborated with artists like Mobley, with composers like Anthony R. Green, a good friend of mine, Cassandra Shankman, wonderful Austin-based composer, DJ, musician. And so this is an opportunity to sort of expand upon the electronic music and the world that we built in previous records, and like create something new, open, acoustic that it really resonated with me. Like, this is probably my favorite project that I've released, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to put it out in the world.
It's a really exciting feeling. Yeah. And earlier we were talking about narrative building, world building within the music. Is there a narrative to this project? Is there a narrative to this music that you guys have created together?
I would say this, over the last 4 years that I've been releasing music, it's starting with this narrative of me and just like 2 other people creating this music in a pretty small environment. And over time, I began to open up and collaborate with more wonderful artists. Yeah. And this one feels like a full-fledged exploration of my music through the lens of other wonderful composers, other wonderful musicians, singers. It's been this just a true collaborative project, and I feel like that's a story that's been sort of expanding. It's called Close to Home as well, and the idea behind that is we're bringing the creative worlds that I've been building with classical training, the classical sort of mindset and instruments all into one space. It feels like a coming home moment of sorts, you know?
One of the things that's so cool about this record and then the show that we've got coming up on the 8th is it feels like this continual evolution. And even me, as a close collaborator of yours, I'm always seeing your name on the caller ID being like, I wonder what's next, you know? What's this one going to be about? This is cool.
I know with a lot of your projects you have a video element. There's always a multimedia element to it. Why is that important for Close to Home?
I think it really makes it come to life in a few different ways. One, it's like a super diverse group of musicians, mostly BIPOC creatives, singers, instrumentalists, who write their own music, who have their own projects. And I just want to showcase that for one. Yeah. I think also the chemistry between us is really palpable. People are interacting with each other in real time, and like we can really gauge like what we're feeling based off of those visuals. And I think lastly, it's like we live in such a visual, video-driven society. I feel like we see each other through video more than we do anything else.
Like in real life even.
Right. Yeah, oh my God, yeah. You feel like you've seen somebody like, but you're like, wait, have we ever met before? Like,
the forming of a parasocial relationship.
Yeah, I like that word, parasocial, also.
Yeah, it's actually a sociological or a sociology term. So.
No, I'm really interested. Okay, I'm really interested in this.
Really
little sidebar.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in those really specific terms or like sort of pillars of thought.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That help you relate to people and your...
And like the audience. Yeah, so the idea of like a parasocial relationship is, especially with creators, so whether it's musicians or like I'm on the air every night, it's kind of a one-way output. I am putting out my voice 7 nights a week. People consume that. I don't actually have a lot of feedback from my listeners in real time. Just like when you're up on stage with an audience, there's some auditory feedback, the clapping, and you can see their faces, but they're not really talking with you.
Right.
But the parasocial relationship is by them consuming your output, oftentimes there's this psychological effect of they think they know you, but they only know your stage presence. So it becomes this almost like one-sided dynamic, relationship dynamic. So being aware of like, okay, so people are forming a parasocial relationship with me. What does that look like ethically for me as a creator? What does that look like for them as an audience, as a consumer?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think when you have an awareness of that dynamic or more of it, you can make better informed decisions.
Exactly, yeah.
Hopefully, or not just like curl up in a ball. What do I do? You know?
So this is a highly collaborative project. Can you talk about what that collaboration looks like for y'all? You were talking about getting on the phone once a week, but what does the actual music making look like between y'all?
Initially, I sent Nate my song Keep On was the first one that we completed together. And Nate brought a first version, and I was listening to it, and I was walking through the grocery store, and I was like, okay, this sounds good. Okay. Oh, that part. I love that.
Yeah.
Can we like expand on that? Oh, and maybe if the sonic language is more like this. And so it's like, I feel like in a good collaboration, you are stating the things that are exciting to you and making those pretty plain, and then handing it to someone who has the capabilities to either do that or maybe like expand upon that in a way that you didn't imagine. I feel like that's been the case through my favorite collaborations, and this is no exception. That was our first one. The other one, I just handed it to Nate, and he was like, all right, here you go. Boom. And I was like, yep, that's it.
That's it. I love that.
Yeah, and the recent one that we're working on now, it feels like it's more of a give and take. We're actually in the same room creating. I like this idea. What do you think? Exchanging moments of playing on the piano, and then Nate taking over and doing his thing.
We were working on it the other night, and we set like sort of like a parameter for when we could work on it together, instead of like me working on it over here on my own and him working on his own. We're like, okay, we'll work on it only together, and then we turn it off until we're together again, so we see how this works like in a complete tandem experience.
Yeah.
There's an exercise in like acting schools where people stand in a circle and they all have a ball, and the goal of that exercise is to focus all of your energy on getting your ball to the other person, because if everybody does that, then you turn and the ball's right there in your hand. And so I kind of feel like that's where we're headed with this.
Is there anything that you hope your audience gets from this project? Talking about that parasocial relationship.
I think it's this feeling. Just like, oh, okay. Yeah, a feeling of like, okay, let me. It's like someone saying, hey, let me play some songs for you. Sit there, relax. I feel like that's part of the feeling, and providing space for someone to rest, to enjoy that, to feel at home in a way.
Well, we're coming up kind of to the end. Is there anything else that you want to say about this project coming out in June, or any of the upcoming performances that y'all have together?
I mean, there's this big show that happened on June 8th at the 04 Center.
Well, yeah, I'm excited. It's bringing together a couple of different worlds, that the strings and my music, plus these wonderful singers, plus a really great rhythm section. Just so many talented individuals on one stage. And I think, again, the feeling is like listening to and going over the set list with Nate. These are songs that bring a level of like peace, a level of like clarity, a level of like rest and excitement to them. I'm so excited to put those out into the world and for people to hear them. It's just honestly just a celebration. I'm excited to see folks there. I'm really excited about this collaboration with the Golden Hornet Ensemble, Graham Reynolds' group. We're performing on July 13th with my string ensemble. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, there's also a film that I'm writing the score to, that a bunch of Daniel's music got featured in, which is coming out on June 19th. From a relationship that you developed at KMFA, right?
Yeah.
So that story in that film is really, really great. It's called If They Took Us Back, and so it's really fun that Daniel's music got featured in it. It was sort of like, from what I understand from the director, Daniel's music was sort of the stimulant for a lot of the creativity, and then, proximity effect, I got to write the score, which was awesome. It was a great experience, like my first time working with a full orchestra. So really excited about that too.
That's super cool. Is that premiering in Austin anywhere?
It is, yeah.
It's on Juneteenth at the Stateside Paramount.
Okay.
It'll be really beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna play a few songs in the beginning. We're gonna like premiere the film, do a Q&A. There's like a bunch of vendors there as well. So it's like a whole experience on Juneteenth. Definitely worth checking out. Yeah, I'm fussing and fighting, trying to figure. My new record, Close to Home, is coming out June 6th. You can find it wherever you listen to your music. Spotify, Apple, etc. Feels like a breath of fresh air. R&B, soul meets strings in a live setting. Go check it out.
If people want to find you online, where can they do that?
If people want to see what I'm doing online, you can go to Instagram.com/fears on the internet, FEARS on the internet. You can also go to danielfears.com, and it's got all the links, all the music, everything to stay connected.
I'm on Instagram at nathaniel.earl, so at nathaniel.earl, and also nathanielearl.com has a lot of the music that I've worked on, past projects with Daniel. That's me, and Spotify as well, Nathaniel Earl, Apple Music, all the DSPs.
Thank you so much for your time today, y'all. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise, Jess. You always
Thank you so much.
ask good questions.
Oh, thank you.
So good. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.